So thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. So exciting to have you here having this conversation about finance, money, and women. The aim of the evening and the focus of tonight is really about educating, supporting, and creating more of an awareness around this topic of finance and money. We want to be able to empower females across the world with one of the areas that I believe they feel the most vulnerable in, depending on their marital status or not. Finance tends to be the topic that is almost taboo to be having as a real conversation. It tends to be one of those topics, and I know this will come up tonight, but it tends to be one of those topics that we're assumed to have knowledge about, but don't really learn about unless we study. So tonight brings 4 amazing speakers, and we'll go around the table and just introduce ourselves. Georgina, would you like to take us? Would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So everyone calls me George. All my clients call me George. So I'm George Howard. I work currently at the Fry Group, and I'm the only female chartered financial planner in DIFC. So I work out of there. I've been giving advice to clients now for over 25 years, and the aim is really to put a financial plan in place for clients that works for their families and is really adapted for them individually.
Thank you, George. Zoe.
Hi ladies, my name is Zoe Turner, and my background is in social work. I qualified in social work many years ago in the UK. For 10 years, I worked in frontline child protection, where I coached vulnerable adults and children to achieve positive results in their lives. After doing that for many years and investing in property, which I managed myself, I was burnt out and I was strung out and I needed a change. So I got an opportunity to move to Dubai, and I started work as a financial advisor. And at the time, financial advice in some areas in Dubai is quite unregulated, and that was the area that I was in. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to come and do that job. And whilst I enjoyed it for a few years, the more I actually understood the role and what we were dealing with, I became quite disillusioned with it, with the products that we were selling. And it didn't sit right with my values. So I decided to leave, and I've taken a full circle. And I am now gone back to my coaching, and I deliver virtual workshops, meditations, retreats. And I also have my own podcast, the Zoe Turner podcast, basically to help master the machine inside you, which is your mind. Alongside that as well, I've also, sorry, just going on a little bit, but alongside that, I've also realized that I've developed a flair for branding, and I've joined forces with my website developer, and we also deliver branding services for entrepreneurs who want to take their business online.
Thank you, Zoe. That's amazing, amazing work. Lamar.
Hi, my name is Lamar Abugali. I have been working in various parts of the financial field for many years, and I've done everything around the spectrum from project analysis to hedge fund analysis. I was a money market dealer at one point, and I've spent the last 15 years working in establishing financial services entities across the region for both VC and PE firms. Everything from investment banks to brokerage firms, and my last role to an actual full-fledged wholesale bank. That was the project that I was hired to work on.
Thank you, Lamar. Fiona, welcome.
Thank you. Well, my name is Fiona McClafferty. I was working as a private client tax advisor for 17 years, both here in Dubai and back in the UK as well. So dealing with families, high net worth individuals, helping them understand their UK tax position, helping set up trusts, helping unravel issues with the revenue, basically lots of problem solving. But my really, all I'd ever wanted to do was to teach economics, but decided that I ought to get a proper job. And like all my other friends on my degree, they were all becoming accountants and investment bankers and things like that, and going off on fabulous holidays. And the life of a teacher and the pay of a teacher didn't really meet my expectations, let's say. So I did 17 years in financial services. I was also working in the GIFC as well for 4 years. And then recently retrained to be an economics and business studies teacher, which I absolutely love. So as my students will tell you, I'm a self-confessed economics geek. I get ridiculously excited about microeconomics in the news, and so they're very good and they humour me, which I'm quite lucky with. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's so exciting to have the four of you with me this evening, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. So let's just jump right to the beginning. And our first question, we'll ask George. George, what would you say is the number one challenge that you've identified women as having as a wealth manager?
So I would say that women like to really understand something very in depth. They want to ask lots of questions and they want to be fully informed before they make any decisions. So quite often they'll go to the web and just have a little look and find out as much as they can. Whereas I think men just have a different approach. So I find that I really get to know my clients really well. So for example, I've got a client that's been going through a really bad divorce for the last 4 years. And she's finally got her decree absolute and she can now start moving on with her life. But I've been with her every step of the way. And the idea of actually involving somebody early on in that situation is much better. So it's all about having someone to confide in that can ask the silly questions. Someone to trust as well is really, really important. I do think that people buy people, and having worked in the industry now for over 25 years, I know a lot about financial planning and how to really go on a journey to build your future and have financial freedom.
Amazing.
So hopefully that answers your question.
So would you say, George, that they're really vulnerable when they come to you?
Some women are, yes. I think it depends, because some women in a relationship, normally there's one person that's stronger on the finances than the other. And then sometimes you find that the weaker person on the finances is thrown into a situation where they have to be strong because they're going to be on their own. So it's all about having financial freedom for yourself. So, if I go back to my childhood, my mum always said to me, make sure that you are truly independent financially, because my mum and dad got divorced when I was 3. And so she learned the hard way, and she really did that into me and my siblings. So I feel that that's put me in very good stead. And that's what I try and instill in my clients. So if I'm meeting the husband, for example, I always like the wife to come to the meeting as well, so that they have an understanding and somebody to meet. So if something happens to that person, the other person that's strong in finances, they can pick up the phone to somebody that they already know, rather than picking up the phone to a stranger in a situation that's very emotional.
Wow, amazing. Thank you, George. Zoe, in the work that you do, what would you suggest that, and you've seen two sides of the coin now in your work with finance and your work with as a coach, what would you suggest that to women that you've been working with to do to build a more positive mindset around the topic of money?
Thanks, Marie. That's a really good question. So I guess like any financial advice, it's very much like building a house. You have to have the correct foundations in place before you lay the bricks. When it comes to mindset, I would say that the basic foundation is practicing gratitude, being very grateful and being appreciative of what you currently have right now in your life. Many people might not be where they want to be financially. However, there is always somebody worse off than yourself. So be grateful for where you are, here and now, right now, in this moment, and that will open the channels to create more abundance in your life. So it's all about cultivating an attitude of gratitude, and then you'll start seeing more abundance and more wealth come into your life. Secondly, I would ask women to examine their relationship with money. So ask yourself what your money mindset is. What beliefs do you hold about money? For instance, our background affects how we, how we view money. Many people come from not a lot of money in the family home. So, quite often the more people think that they don't want to be poor, the more they're going to attract that into their life, because it's the law of attraction. So I would recommend that people change their thinking around money. See yourself as abundant, having all that you desire, and then this is what you will attract into your life.
Thank you, Zoe. I want to come back to that in a minute, but moving on from the mindset and with what George said about being able to bring women into that conversation. Fiona, I know that you've worked in finance. You did it for 17 years. You were in that world. You really understand the terminology and the language and just the whole being around money and being comfortable talking about it. How do you see, as an economics teacher who used to work in that world, how do you see financial confidence increasing in younger females in secondary schools now?
I think I would say their interest is growing more than their confidence. I think in Dubai particularly, where secondary school students can't have part-time jobs, don't tend to have bank accounts like they might do in the UK or in the rest of Europe, it means that you have less of an opportunity to exhibit that financial confidence and to really have an awareness. I'd say it's not just young females. I'd say it's across the board, and it is something that a lot of the schools and through the Ministry of Education, they are actually trying to change students' outlook, to prepare them for university. So we do budgeting exercises with them. They have to think, well, what is a credit card and what is a debit card? Because I don't know about you guys, but nobody ever explained the difference to me when I was at school. And obviously it's pre-internet, before showing my age there. But we try to give them as many opportunities as we can to experience that. One of the great things we do is Student Investor, which I know a lot of the schools in Dubai do, which allows them to invest in a fantasy portfolio of FTSE 100 stocks. And they get a fantasy £100,000 to spend, and they get to invest that and watch and see what happens. And that's become a huge global endeavor. It's really popular, and that seems to it's a very easy way of introducing that. But very often I find that when I'm talking in lessons, we might be talking about factors that influence demand. We talk about, income. So if your allowance increases, are you going to buy more things? Well, yes. And so the same will happen with salary. What about interest rates? A lot of them have heard of interest rates, but they're not quite sure what they mean. So we end up talking, sometimes the lesson can kind of go off in a little bit of a tangent. We do a little chat about mortgages and savings interest and how the bank makes money. They charge more on lending money than they do on, they pay on savings interest and things like that. So I think it's just, whilst I do, part of me regrets not becoming a teacher as soon as I left university, because it is a great job and I absolutely love it, and I can't recommend it highly enough. But at the same time, it has given me opportunities to learn things along the way that I can just drop into a lesson that may not necessarily be related to what we're talking about. It's just such fertile ground at the moment with everything that's going on. I would even say 2 years ago, when just after Uber took over Kareem, I had one of the children in my class said, "Miss, if they bought, I can't remember the exact figure now, one of you, I'm sure, correct me, 3 billion in cash, does that mean they actually withdrew 3 billion in cash and just handed the cash over?" And it was, really, it was great to be able to say, well, no, when they say cash, they mean like not stocks, not shares, not loans, and just, just being able to drop these things, it hopefully piques their interest, and makes them think, oh, maybe we want to know more about that. So I'd say it's more interest rather than confidence. I think we've got a little way to go yet.
And do you see the numbers increasing in females choosing economics as a subject?
No. Economics is very much a male subject. It's perceived as quite hard. It is. It's not an easy subject, but it does tend to attract more boys than girls. And I think I'm not entirely sure of the reason for that. It is something that is being looked at constantly, particularly in the UK and elsewhere in the world. I've got the stats for the UK somewhere. So last year, so in 2019, about 75% of the A-level candidates for A-level economics were boys. GCSE, it was 65% male. And the only subjects that were higher than that in terms of male participation were things like computing and higher maths and physics. So economics does kind of seem to get labelled as, a hard subject, all about money and things like that. But actually, it's so much more than that. It's not just about stock market. It's not just about money. We look at individual behaviour. Behavioural economics has come a lot more into the A-level specification more recently. So we look at, well, are consumers rational? Okay, we have this very theoretical concept of Homo economicus, economic man, but really, is that how we act? Is that how it? Well, then they start thinking, well, no, it's not, and we can bring lots more in.
Very interesting. So
interesting. It really is. They need to stop me because this is what I mean. I'm such a geek. I'll just keep going on and on.
Yeah, no, it sounds really good, and I'm really interested to learn more about that. But I want to move on to Lamar. Lamar, I know you did some mentorship with young females. What would you say are the key basic financial literacy principles that you would encourage women to understand so that they can be more confident with the financial literacy?
I say let's just to let whoever's watching understand what financial literacy actually talks about. So it's basically the ability to manage your personal finances efficiently. And so that will include everything from understanding how to invest your money, the types of insurance products that you would require, real estate investments, paying for your college, budgeting, retirement, tax planning. So all of these things fall under the umbrella of being financially literate. And depending on who you're dealing with and what the requirements are, the mentorship would vary. So one of the first young women that I worked with, her need was she wanted to leave her job. She wanted to become her own boss. So she, even though she was a good salesperson, she didn't understand the basics of incorporating her company, putting together a financial forecast, bringing an investor on board. How much equity should she offer that investor in return for the amount of money that he was going to give her, and to make sure that it was fair for both parties and how that relationship would work out. In addition to how much borrowing she would need to take on from a bank in order for her business to continue running with working capital. So these are the types of things that fall under understanding how to run your personal finance. And if you're financially illiterate, it leads to all sorts of problems. It's the reason people have subprime mortgages, fraud, are subject to high interest rates on like variable interest mortgages sometimes. These things result in having bad credit, and sometimes even worse, they can lead to bankruptcy and foreclosures on properties if you're not managing your money correctly.
I think, I sometimes wonder if we need to bring women together and as adults and educate them. So George, what would you want to contribute to that? Because I know that you feel that you want to add something to this conversation about children and the youth, and even hearing what Fiona was saying about mentoring young financiers. What do you think you would like to add to the topic?
So it really resonates with me what Fiona was saying, because children want to be involved, and I think parents are reticent to involve their children. But actually, for example, I look after 3 generations of one family, and so the grandparents have given the grandchildren some money, and they want the grandchildren to understand the value of money and get them. So what we've done is done an education piece to explain in a bank account, what the difference is if you're going to put your money away longer term and hopefully get a better return, that the value of your investment might go up, it might go down. So the education piece is really, really important, especially, well, for anybody actually, before they look to invest their money long term for the future. It's important they understand what they're getting into. So we very much try and involve all of the family. Sometimes I just do education for the children or grandchildren to help them along the way and get started, and things like mortgages if they're buying their first home, giving the children some money to help them on the property, then we put them in touch with the right people.
So interesting. Education, it always comes back to the foundations of education. I'm assuming, Lama, when you were doing the mentoring with these young women, did you find that they were feeling confident about being open with you about their insecurities, or maybe not having enough knowledge and background? Or did you find that they were just not really coming forward and saying, listen, I think I need some help? What was the confidence level with the young women that you were working with?
It was generally like average, and one of the things that we were asked to do as mentors is not just to open up our networks to our mentees, which is essentially, if there's a topic that they are weak in, and you have an expert in that area that they needed to talk to, that you make that introduction, that you give them that education from the right type of person. So, for example, with her, I put her through a competition. I said, okay, so you're doing a business plan anyway, so let's make some money out of it. I put her through a business plan competition. She won second place. With that second place, she not only got cash, but she also got access to an accelerator, where then she was mentored by a company that then took her through the process of how she should value her company, how much equity she should give away, how much money she'd be able to borrow given the forecast of revenue that she was expecting to have, and how she needed to manage herself so that she would not fall through the cracks in the first 2 years or 3 years of operating.
Wow. Okay. Wow, it's so interesting. I feel like I'm in the front row of probably one of the most interesting lessons I've ever gone through. George, we're going to bring it right back to you and take you to a survey that I came across when I was doing some research. Now, according to this Canadian survey by Strategy Marketing, they claim that 87% of women looking for an advisor say they can't find anyone to connect with. And they say that their view on this is it's challenging for them. What would you see as the potential strategy for them to overcome this obstacle?
So I think it's difficult to find the right person. So in my industry, I'm in a male-dominated environment. So first of all, finding a qualified female advisor is really, really tough. So some people relate more to females and some people relate more to males. So at the Fry Group, we're all qualified advisors. So depending on who you would prefer to meet. But for women in particular, I think that it's making that initial contact, not knowing what to expect. It's making them feel comfortable that there are no silly questions. It's not talking jargon. It's being really straight down the line. So when I worked at one of my previous companies, I dealt with lottery winners, and some of them had never even had a bank account. So you had to educate them at the start and just explain essentially what a bank account was, all the way through to wait for them to move house, buy the things they want, and then invest the money later. So I'm able to relate to lots of different people. It comes back to what we were talking about earlier, where I was saying that you effectively need to have all the parties in the room to make an informed decision on what's right and bringing them in. So in terms of the qualified advice, I would say that is one thing. The second thing is also getting a friend to say, okay, I've met this person, I think they're really good. So a lot of my work actually comes from referrals, and I think that's something that women look for more nowadays. Is even if, I've just literally moved house today and I was looking for workmen to do various things, and I really wanted a recommendation rather than just Googling and finding a company. And the recommendations all worked out, and the one I Googled myself didn't. So it just goes to show that you just don't know what to expect. And also coming into an office environment. Now, I know that with COVID-19, we haven't necessarily been in the office, so we've been doing calls like this with our clients. And I've found my clients have opened up a lot more because they're comfortable, they're at home, they're in their own environment, they're not stepping into a world that they don't know and feel maybe a little bit threatened. So the idea is that I go out and meet clients in their own home, or we do calls like this obviously at the moment, but it's making people feel comfortable that there are no silly questions. They can ask whatever they feel that they need to know in order to make the right decision. And it's all about getting financial freedom on what's right for your own personal position.
Amazing. It's really I would put a financial advisor right up there with a dentist and a gynecologist. I think I would rank them about that it's just trusting and in your most vulnerable parts of who you are, isn't it?
Yes, no, absolutely it is. And I think it's also the unknown. If you've never actually met a financial advisor before, you don't know what to expect. And you think, some people have some debt that they've accumulated, and sometimes we have to start with helping with the debt side of things before we start looking at other things. And people are sometimes just worried about what my view might be. I don't have any views. I'm just here to help and lay the foundations for what will be hopefully a really good family plan moving forwards.
Wow, amazing. Zoe, I want to bring another survey that was done. This time it was done by Success Resources. It says that women are far less likely to feel confident talking about money as men, and they suffer because of it. Now, as a mind coach, how do you help women overcome these limiting beliefs? I know you talked a little bit about the mind before and the belief system around money, but how would you help them to overcome the limiting beliefs they have about money?
Yeah, thanks, Marie. It's another very good question. They all do all the mindset questions do evolve into one. But for many women, it's very challenging to feel confident around money when society is constantly telling them that they're less than. So it's about time that we do break that mold and that women start to feel more comfortable and more confident when dealing with money. I would again suggest that women change the way that they think about money to try and overcome their limitations. See money as a commodity, something that will help you give back to society. It's an opportunity to help you grow, maybe charity work, making the world a better place, being able to gift, support people that you love financially. Life is very much about what you can give rather than what you can take. So, if we see money as a commodity, it may be the beginning of it may help an individual start to overcome any limitations that they have.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because you're dealing with a lot of, it's like peeling an onion when you're dealing with limiting beliefs around money, especially in thinking about how young girls are still not choosing to take subjects like economics. And there's the whole having to re-educate families about the importance of it, not just because you want to be investing money, but for the basics, and going back to what Lamar was saying about making sure that we understand terminology and understand the basic requirements for being able to really feel confident having this, whether it be with some of the cases, George, that you talked about, helping people get through their debt before you can even move forward and look at investments. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Zoe. Lama, adding on to Zoe's thoughts about the confidence to overcome these limiting beliefs about money, what topics would you encourage women to pay more attention to that will have a positive impact on their economic futures?
Well, it's actually the topics that they really need to pay attention to is who they're voting for and what are the policies those people that they're voting for are going to support. And the biggest barrier to us talking about money is having money in the first place. It's going to take about 202 years before we achieve equal pay in the world. And that's according to the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report. And that is absolutely ridiculous. And apart from equal pay, there's a range of other policies that impact the financial lives of women. And those things include affordable childcare, flexible schedules, reproductive rights, all sorts of topics that all basically feed into your ability to be financially empowered. And financial empowerment is basically women's empowerment. And these two taboo topics have always been that way for women, money and power. And we need to own those words. We need to say it's okay for us to want all of these things that the same as the male counterparts. And when these types of barriers are removed, so things like affordable childcare and flexible schedules, we're going to be able to accumulate as much wealth as men, and then we're going to be able to wield more influence at home. So once women actually achieve financial freedom, equality will follow. And these are actually the topics that you need to be worrying about, because how are you going to even get to worry about your personal finance if you're not even making the same kind of money?
I agree, but can we wait that long? I mean, how do we start? Where do we start now?
Who you vote for.
And in a country like this where there is no voting, so how would you encourage women here in parts of the world where they can't have a say in who they vote for?
Then you would really need to look at who it is you're willing to work for and what kind of diversity programs they have in place and what kind of gender pay surveys that they publish in their financial reports. Because a lot of companies do that. Like, for example, I know most of the big four, they'll publish reports at the end of the year about the gender pay gap that they have and when they're planning on closing it. The diversity gap that they have and when they're planning on closing it. It's actually part of their KPIs that they have to deliver every year. So if you look at the types of company that you want to work for and you start choosing the types of companies where you can see that these things are not big issues or the things are quite close, you're at least going in the right direction and not having to fight for that pay increase every single year just to get yourself at par with somebody.
Definite food for thought in the education sector, Fiona, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the gender pay gap is something that quite a lot of students, it piques their interest. And again, I would say this is there's no male-female split on this. I think they're all equally intrigued when they find out about the gender pay gap and how wide it is. They're all genuinely really surprised. And I agree. I think it's a case of educating both girls and boys that they are valued and they do deserve, and giving them the tools, as Lamar said, to make sure that they are doing a job that they love. I didn't do a job that I loved for a long time. I bought my flat and I traveled the world and I had amazing experiences. But I think giving students the choice and the information to make that decision and think, well, okay, do I want to do something that I absolutely love, or do I want to do something else for a little while and then do what I want with my life? And just giving them the options that you don't have to choose. You don't have to go to the best university to get the best job in the future. Okay, you have to do what you're passionate about. You know, even if you think about Richard Branson, who left school, I think, before even he did his A-levels. You know, yes, education is super important and it gives you that network, it gives you the stepping stones. But I think really giving students the tools to understand the world around them, to interpret what's going on, that's why I think, you know, economics should be one of the core subjects, because it's so important that we understand what's going on around us, to make a more informed decision, whether that's about your career, whether it's about which country to live in, whether that's about you know, how to invest. And you know, I also agree completely that, you know, there are so many things like reproductive rights, like childcare, like workplace flexibility, all these things. There's a huge economic impact when you see that. When you look at developing countries and you look at their GDP, invariably it's tied to an increase in female participation, which is tied to an increase in female education. And you know, there is so much out there that, you know, economics can just take you anywhere.
Definitely, and you're definitely in the right place. I feel very, very excited to see that someone of your caliber, having done 17 years in the world of finance, is now at the front of a classroom mentoring and teaching young people. Definitely someone to be looking out for. That school that you're joining is very, very lucky to have you. Okay, George, we're going to move into some real tips, some tips that you can offer women today, some young women on the call, you know, who also might be considering in the investing of money during times like COVID-19.
Okay, so it's not an easy time, and I think the biggest takeaway is coming back to what you said earlier, actually, is that when you go to a dentist or a gynecologist, or you wouldn't go to somebody that wasn't qualified. You would want to know that your dentist was going to pull the right tooth out and give you the right injections to make sure that you don't feel the pain. So getting a qualified advisor that can help you through what is a tricky landscape, because first and foremost, I always talk to my clients about the risk that they want to take. And it's really important that we start on a level playing field, because I don't do this, but I might go to the casino every day and gamble all my money on red or black. And you might not be able to actually take that kind of risk. So we spend a lot of time doing a report and understanding the risk that you want to take before we start looking at investing. So first of all is to make sure, we call it this, or I call it the sleep at night factor. If your investment went down, which obviously we've seen over the last 2 months that money has gone down if you've had it invested, can you sleep at night and tolerate that? Or is that going to make you feel really uncomfortable and do something like take your money out at the worst time possible? So if we relate it to property, if you bought a property and it went down in value, as long as you're not looking to sell it, it doesn't matter. If you sell the property, you realize that loss at that time. So it's all about navigating the playing field and making sure that you have somebody there to hold your hand through the whole process. Because what's really important is having, we call it a diversified portfolio. So you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You don't put all your eggs in one company. You don't put all your eggs in one geographical location. It's all about having a spread and investing in different areas, so that if one area goes down, hopefully another area hasn't gone down and it can complement what you're doing. So I would say that also to not put all your money in one go into the market. So we call it drip feeding. So we do it over a period of time, and that might be monthly savings from your salary, for example, or if you have a lump sum to invest and we don't just put it in today, we wait and do it over a period of weeks or months that we agree at the beginning, because we're trying to build long-term relationships, and it's important that we start on a really good footing. And if you're going to be investing in the market, you need to be investing for a time frame of at least 5 years, unless you're happy to be in cash, obviously in a bank account. So I'd say the pandemic has changed views on a lot of different things. I think that we're going to see quite a big fallout from companies that are not going to survive. So we're already seeing companies that haven't survived. So Virgin Australia very quickly, unfortunately, went into liquidation. And we haven't seen the fallout from this yet. So people are starting to lose their jobs. Then that's going to have an impact because they won't be able to pay their mortgages, or they won't be able to carry on paying their rent. And then what will happen down the line is that more and more people will become unemployed. And I know it sounds like I'm painting a really dark picture, but the cycle keeps happening, and it's happened time and time again, and we are unfortunately going into this cycle, and there's no government in the world that can help everybody. It's impossible. So therefore, I think it's all about making sure you're completely comfortable. Always make sure that you have a cash buffer to cover at least 3 to 6 months of your normal outgoings, so that if the worst was to happen, you've got money there to fall back on before you start investing for the future. And it's all about having a balance. You know, you can have the Dubai lifestyle if you want to, but also having some savings in place along the way as well is really good. So my takeaway would be, make sure you get qualified advice from a qualified advisor, rather than going to somebody that doesn't necessarily know exactly what to do and that tries to fit something, a product, into your situation rather than fitting your situation into what is exactly right for you. So yeah, at the Fry Group, we give independent financial advice. We're completely independent, so we don't have to use one company. We can choose who's right for you.
Wow, I felt my blood pressure rising a little bit there. Thank you, George. I'm gonna go and pay a little more attention. Lamar, you talked about some really important key points, and you really you made me realize not that I didn't already realize, but the importance of educating these underlying topics. And where do you believe that young people, teachers, educators, parents should be looking for resources that would help young women learn about all these key topics? Where would the go-to, resources be for them to start learning?
Well, luckily for this generation, there are so many online tools that are available to them, and that either are free or don't cost a lot. Some of these things include budgeting tools or budgeting apps like Mint or Pocket Guard. There's one, and they're tailored. So like there's even one called Good Budget. That one's for couples. And then there's even one that's best for A-type personalities. So you can go online and find a multitude of tools. So there's some really good websites that will give you like the best of list, things like NerdWallet or Forbes or The Balance. They'll give you the 8 best personal finance websites that you can look through, and based on your needs or whatever it is you're looking to learn more about, then start reading up. And obviously for kids that are just starting out, they're going to college, I think learning how to budget whatever their allowances are, and if they have a part-time job as well, that's where they should start early. They should understand how to manage their money at that stage. And then as you move into the workforce, then I definitely think that one of the initial things that you should do is actually get counseling from a financial expert, because you want to have a long-term plan in place. And the earlier you start, the less you actually have to put in over time in order to reach that goal. So I know a lot of people are scared or not really sure because they think they need to have so much money before they even, approach somebody who's a financial expert. It's generally not true. People are very happy to give information and to give advice very early on, because it allows that relationship to be very long-term and help those people reach their goals in a much more structured and efficient way, rather than come to them when they need help first to pay down debt. So services like the ones that George offers, or the tax planning that sorry, I'm
Fiona.
really terrible with names.
Fiona
did. Fiona was doing. These are very important services to actually start at very early on in your career. Is as soon as you get that first paycheck, then you need to understand how you need to be slicing it up in order for you not to have to work forever. Fantastic.
Zoe, I know my blood pressure is rising. I might need to phone you after this, but what tips can you offer young females to strengthen their mindsets. We're going to keep going back to this because what we tell ourselves is really how we behave. And hearing what Lamar was just saying about this idea that we need to have so much money before we can reach out to someone like George or someone like Fiona and Lamar. What are your top tips?
I would say stop comparing yourself. Excuse me, stop comparing yourself to others, because comparison is the thief of all joy. Money doesn't define you. It's not about having the designer bag, the best car, and those designer shoes. So as cheesy as this sounds, develop yourself more, develop your heart more. This, again, as we discussed previously, is going to help you create an abundant mindset. The things that you can do, the practices that you can do to develop this is meditate, practice gratitude, like we've already discussed. Language is a big one. Stop using limiting language. For instance, saying I can't afford it. I'm sure many people have heard of Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He basically says that when you say I can't afford it, it gets you stuck in a loop of you never being able to afford anything you want. Therefore, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. He suggests that you turn that into I can afford it and how can I afford it? And I also think that parents have a responsibility as well on the way that they choose to address and talk about money at home. You know, quite often we're experiencing very challenging times at the moment. People have lost their jobs. Just be very careful about how you discuss money at home, because what you don't want to be doing is creating that lack in your child and that scarcity within your child, because these beliefs will follow them into adulthood.
Wow, thank you.
On a practical note, I would also recommend that children save and they just start putting money aside. You know, maybe get a job, save, but also do your own due diligence when it comes to investing and don't trust everyone. You know, I know Georgina has spoken about, you know, going with someone who's qualified, and, you know, I know many qualified financial advisors who I wouldn't trust. So it's really, you know, it's important to have your credentials, very important. But unfortunately, it is an industry that can be quite well paid, you know, in terms of the commissions. And because of that, regardless of whether or not you've got qualifications, there's a lot of people that will take advantage of that. So really do your own due diligence and look at different forms of investment, you know, because while people are independent, it doesn't mean that they have access to everything. So look at different ways of investing.
Thank you, Zoe.
Create your own income stream.
Thank you. That's great. And just before we close with Fiona, Georgina, what last tips would you like to offer?
So just coming back to what Zoe was saying about the right advisor and the commission. So that is a really important point that I haven't actually talked about, is that we only work on a fee basis. So therefore, there are no kickbacks whatsoever that we receive from the products that we put in place for our clients. So we are completely transparent, and clients get a full report with recommendations showing them everything, and then they can make an informed decision if they want to proceed. At that stage, if they don't want to, it hasn't cost them anything. So there are no hidden kickbacks, there's no tie-ins and things like that. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. Okay, Fiona, just before we wrap it up for an evening, I really
you should all do economics. You should all study economics.
I just really feel that you are a role model for young women in economics, not just at your institution, but anywhere, because you are a minority teaching economics as well. There are not many women that do teach the subject. So just being in that position, being an excellent educator, but also coming with 17 years of experience in the field, how are you sharing that wisdom with your students? How are you sharing your wisdom of of the knowledge of finance, but also being in that position of educator where they are looking up to you. They are really hanging off of every word that you say and trusting what you say. And of course, they're going home and they're feeding back this information potentially to siblings and parents as well. So you're educating them and they potentially are educating those at home. How are you using that empowering role with the youth?
Blimey, I think I'm going to need my blood pressure brought down now as well. That was quite an accolade. My goodness. Well, I would love to think that I do even half of that, Maria. So thank you for that kind of amazing accolade. But I love talking, as you can probably tell. I love talking about economics, and I do always say to my students, right, okay, sometimes I can tell, if they don't really want to do any work that day, I'll just get Miss McCafferty, ask her a question about, I don't know, bond markets or something, and then she'll just rattle on about that, and we won't have to do any work. But I want to you. But particularly with A levels, the really important thing is that you read around the subject. So with my A-level students and also my IB students, I'm constantly telling them, watch the news, read the news. Twitter is amazing. So I tweet and I use the hashtag economic students. Any articles, so I try and draw out the economics in there. So for example, the other day there was an article, it's an old article, but it was retweeted, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, talking about how air pollution impacts the value of asset values. I don't know if you saw that, George.
I haven't.
No, really interesting. They were saying that in one street, where there's high pollution at one end of the street, the value of a house can be 15% lower than where it is when the pollution's lower. And then everything we were talking about, and there's so much microeconomics in there, and that's what we've been studying. I've been teaching at A-level at the moment. And you can draw it out of everything, and so I'm constantly bombarding them with articles and saying, have you seen this on Twitter, have you seen this on Instagram? So I use Instagram and Twitter to repost articles, to share articles. I talk about it in lessons. We use Teams. I send them links on Teams so they can read the articles before lessons. So sometimes if something's happened, I might, so for example, when oil prices or the forward price for oil went negative, I completely changed my plan of what I was teaching that week. We got a few articles, accessible articles about this. What does this mean? And read the article, have a think about it, and then come and we'll discuss it. We'll talk about it in the lesson. And that's how I really try to. That's how I think I was. I really got the interest in economics, is the fact that it is so fast moving and it is so current. And that you can learn from current affairs. You can apply the theory and you can see it actually working in practice. So read and read some more. The Financial Times is amazing. Schools can sign up for free access to the Financial Times. So if your school doesn't already have free access, then speak to one of your teachers. You just need one teacher to log in as a teacher, and you can get free access to the Financial Times. The Economist, you get several free articles a month. Both the FT and the Economist sound quite daunting, but the FT also does articles specifically for high school students, so they're a bit more accessible, and there's usually quite a bit of discussion around them. But have a look on Twitter or Instagram. Use the hashtag economic students. You should find lots.
Amazing. So I'm taking away from this, Fiona, your enthusiasm for the subject is just it's naturally magnetic, and it would drive, you made me interested. So if you can make me interested, I'm assuming that you're going to drive that excitement in the classroom. And as we said, it's about educating, but it's also about making it interesting to learn. So thank you so much, Fiona, for being so enthusiastic and really bringing out that interest, because that's definitely going to be contagious in the classroom. And this brings us to the end of our amazing conversation. I think we have a few minutes for questions. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question to any of the speakers? I don't see anything coming through. Ladies, that was amazing. I feel like I had a VIP seat to the best conversation of the week. I am definitely going to be bringing this to the college and letting our students in our department hear this. I know, Fiona, you're probably going to want to replay this for your students as well. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you Lamar and George and Zoe and Fiona for all of your amazing insight and for sharing this information with us. And thank you to the audience for joining. If you missed out tonight, remember to rewind and just watch right from the beginning. Thank you, ladies. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's always someone there for you.
Thank you.
Take my hand, just know you're not alone.